So in this segment, we're going to be having one last look at the polls before the election and before the exit polls come out. So I should hopefully get this video out for 9 p.m. So there are allegedly 16 cabinet ministers who are projected to lose their seats. So let's have a look, and then we'll go into broader polling conversation.
There are 16 cabinet ministers who are standing this election, because remember, quite a lot of them, like Michael Gove, are standing down. 16 standing cabinet ministers projected to lose their seat. I want you to look at all of these faces, because you might not be seeing them in the front line of British politics for much longer. Michelle Donnellan, she's a new one in this polling projection. She's projected to lose to the Lib Dems by 7 points. She's the Science Secretary. Esther McVey, Minister for Common Sense.
I mean, genuinely, the fact that we have a Minister for Common Sense is nuts. If he wanted to add her to the cabinet, why not just add her as a minister without portfolio? It makes zero sense to have a minister of common sense, especially one as silly as her.
She could lose by 5 points. This name here, my goodness. Richard Holden is the Conservative Party chairman. He was a North East MP. He actually did a chicken run, as it's known. He transferred seats.
Oh, my God, it's called a chicken run in media terms. That's great. I love that. The chicken run. That's so funny.
Down to Essex, to Basildon and Billericay. He could lose to Reform.
So I don't know much about this constituency, but Richard Holden's one, he was parachuted into a safe seat because what they did was make a one-person shortlist. So his seat looks very dicey, and I imagine there will be a decent amount of Conservatives that won't turn out, and also a decent amount of Conservatives that will vote Reform this time round.
Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary, Michael Tomlinson, one of the immigration ministers who sits in Parliament. And look at this. Still there, with an almost impregnable advantage for the Lib Dems, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, he's projected to lose by 23 points.
That's wild, you know. That's as close to saying I guarantee it, honestly. There's no way he's keeping his seat.
There seems very little chance this man will be returning, nor this man, Grant Shapps. He's going to...
Don't worry, we'll have Michael Green.
...lose to Labour if anything like this turns out to be true on election day. Defence Secretary Welwyn Hatfield, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary,
the one who demanded credit for doing absolutely nothing and then got her office refurbed as well,
Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, Alicia Shapps, Penny Mordaunt.
This is a big one, in my opinion, because she is meant to be kind of more of a one-nation Conservative. So this could be detrimental to the future of the Conservative Party if someone like her is booted out, and it leaves kind of the more hard-right people like Braverman and Badenoch.
She could lose in Portsmouth North to Labour by 6 points.
She's very unpopular from what I've heard in her constituency as well, so that's not promising for her at all.
Look at this. Alex Chalk could lose to the Lib Dems by 35 points in Cheltenham.
Who is Alex Chalk?
Chief Whip, who would be key in ensuring some kind of discipline in a new parliament. Well, he won't be there if the Nationalists in Wales, Plaid Cymru, defeat him by 9 points.
Phrasing's a bit weird there. The Nationalists in Wales makes them sound a bit... it's a bit of a derogatory thing. Well, depending on what your view of the word nationalism is, I think in England it has a very different term to outside of England. Him losing to Plaid, though, that's big. That's really big.
Welsh Secretary would be out in Wales. The Work and Pension Secretary, a familiar face on our screens because he's on the telly almost every other day, because I'm told not every cabinet minister wants to do broadcast interviews to defend the government. Johnny Mercer, the
Mayor, will be striding out of politics.
Veterans Minister.
Johnny Mercer, complete scumbag. I'm glad to see the back of him. I don't know what... Sometimes when he's on TV, he's incredibly... just frustrating to watch, you know, constantly interrupting, especially kind of female MPs and journalists. Like, I'll be glad to see the back of Mercer, honestly.
And Victoria Prentice, who Rishi Sunak saw just yesterday in Banbury. She could lose to Labour by 7 points. She said it was still looking OK on the doorstep. This doesn't look so much. So you look at all these faces, because you might not be seeing them for that much longer. Right.
And so this is it. I think this is a big one. You know, they could be gone. These are just cabinet ministers as well. You know, according to YouGov, this is the final MRP poll. Sorry, I've got MMRP for some reason in my head. You can see here, you know, Labour projected to get 31 seats, the Conservatives on 102, the Lib Dems on 72, SNP on 18. So that's a huge downswing for them. Reform on +3, Plaid on -1, which is interesting, onto 3, and then Greens on 2. So Greens potentially will double the amount of MPs they have to 2, which would be quite interesting to see if they can manage that. They're not on this colour chart from what I can see. Brighton's like down here somewhere. But, you know, what you can see is a lot of red. A lot of red. it still puts the Conservatives potentially in opposition by a large margin. So that should be interesting to see. You've got cabinet ministers conceding defeat before election day, saddening. Braverman saying we don't give up, we keep fighting with honesty, humility, and determination. You are literally none of those three things. You are incredibly dishonest. You're incredibly arrogant. And determination. You are determined to push through your bad policy. So you got 1 out of 3 there. Labour will be a disaster for our community, maybe for your community, your specific right-wing bunch of lunatics. Honestly, I think they would be, because you lot are crazy. This is other stuff I want to discuss. This is one of the fears I have around the election. You can see here that Reform UK actually doing okay amongst a certain group of voters there, the 18 to 24. Now, I know there was a lot of talk about that group swinging more towards Labour, which is true. If you look at this one, almost 50% of that age bracket are looking to vote Labour. The 25 to 49, 43% of that age bracket are looking to vote Labour. But there are still some crossover with Labour voters and Reform voters. Never forget that. So this is one of the fears here. And, there are some I say kids, it's a bit, some younger adults talking about this.
Choosing a party that would support tuition fees and cut NHS waiting times, and I was in between Labour and Green, and I'd say that I'm still the same, but I will probably tactically vote Labour, unfortunately, even though I would love Green to be in.
That's interesting. When you say tactic...
Do you know what's interesting, actually? This polling, it does have Greens on 15, to be fair. That's quite good. That's their highest bracket with any age group. That's really good.
Voting Labour. We are expecting to hear from Keir Starmer in just a moment. He's in the West Midlands with his final speech. I might have to interrupt you, Georgia. But when you say tactically vote, why Labour? What are the tactics behind your vote?
Because where I'm from, it is a stronghold Conservative seat, and we have seen a rise in Reform supporters, and that, for me, would be the worst outcome. So Labour have the bigger chance of winning and stopping that, so I'd be voting Labour.
That's a really good point, but my only fear is if that Labour vote becomes disenfranchised and those people stay home, then Labour will lose that seat potentially to Reform if they win it. And that's one of the big fears I have. That's why Labour do need to deliver for people. And that's something I've been, saying for at least, I think, the best part of a year now. Because if they come to power and they don't get much done, it's over.
Yeah, Georgia, that's interesting. I mean, you're in Grimsby, one of our target towns in the build-up to this election. We've been in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, the new constituency of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. Is that something you're hearing amongst your peers, this sort of tactical voting? Because you have heard from people saying, the clear choices between Conservatives and Labour in terms of them being the two biggest parties, but even though they're dissatisfied with one, they can't bring themselves to vote for another, so they will go for another party. Is that the kind of thing you've been hearing?
Well, I think amongst my peers as well, we are so dissatisfied with the Conservatives that it's almost do anything you can to remove them rather than voting with your heart.
And that's where, eventually people will start voting more with their hearts if Labour don't deliver. And, I'll be doing more election coverage. I'll be streaming all night, covering it live. So if you're not doing much tonight, during the hours of around 12 and 3 to 4 a.m, please feel free to join me, because this video should go out before then. But you can see there are big problems. I'll be discussing the polling a bit more in detail, but this is the kind of stuff that does scare me a lot, and we'll be discussing that more on the stream. And so I'll catch you then. Bye bye.